Hi everyone, and welcome back to another YouTube video. For those of you who are new here, my name is Mare and I'm a first year acute care pharmacy resident. And for those of you who are returning, it's good to see you again. And today I'll be doing my Residency 101 video for the month of December. And it's out a little bit later than I usually have these videos out because I thought I'd give you all an opportunity to wrap up mid-year if you attended and have an opportunity to regroup as we head into this final stretch where you are finalizing documents, getting those letters of rec in, working on your CV, whatever loose ends you may need to tie up right before winter break and the stretch of applications being due. And so now that ASHP Midyear is over, I hope those of you who were able to attend found it useful, whether it be to parse out those iffy institutions that you had on your list, ask the questions that you needed to figure out whether you wanted to keep them on your list or take them off, whether to figure out you have any strong contenders that you're leaning more towards, and even to take some institutions off your list, which I think is more than okay. I think mid-year and open houses in general are a fantastic opportunity to really understand if you see yourself as a fit at these different places, because all it really takes is one place for you to feel strongly about and for them to feel just as strongly about you, and you have a match and a residency position. So all good things, hopefully, that you were able to take away from that experience. And to piggyback off of that, for the rest of this month, finish wrapping up attending different open houses, reaching out to directors, other residents, if you need to find out more information. Again, for me, the biggest takeaway from all of this is being able to pull unique characteristics about these institutions to then implement in your letter of intent. So if you can do that, I feel like that makes it a lot stronger. And it also helps you as the applicant really figure out what you're looking for and which programs line up with what you want in the long term and the short term, I guess, as well. My list. The next thing is, speaking of our list and how many programs, I just thought I'd share how many I applied to, since that was something I get a question about a lot. So my list ended up being 14 places long, and I applied to acute care programs as well as those that had a more well-rounded experience with an AmCare component. Really just depended on what I was looking for. I was excited about all 14. I really felt like I had an opportunity to meet with them and explore their programs. There were some, of course, that I felt stronger about than others, and that's totally okay. It's completely fair. And I'll talk a little bit more about the ranking process and whatnot as we get further along in this process. But in case you wanted a benchmark, that's mine. I use benchmark also very loosely. I don't think there's a proper number of institutions you can apply to. I have classmates and friends from other places who have applied as many into the 20s and as low as under 5. A lot of people seem to stick between anywhere from 10 to 20. So if that gives you any sort of idea, again, it's totally arbitrary. It's whatever you want. Applications are super costly as well, so it's understandable if you're trying to limit the number of places you apply to. And if you know what you're looking for, of course, that can also be really helpful in paring down the different options that you have. But in case anybody was wondering, my number ended up being 14 at the end of the day. The other thing to make sure that you're looking out for before the end of this month is that your letters of recommendation are submitted. So when you go on that tab on forecast, you should see that they are all submitted from all of your letter writers. Make sure to check at least 1 week before your first application being due. That way you can reach out to that writer and ensure that they are able to submit it in time, and it gives you a proper amount of time for follow-up, because I always work under the assumption of the worst case scenario. Let's say they don't message you back for about 2 days and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You still have a 5-day buffer. So the more that you're thinking ahead, the easier it'll be on you in the long run, both for your letter writer and yourself, and hopefully take some stress out of this already stressful situation. As far as also picking letters of rec to submit, I've gotten a couple of questions as far as you have a couple of letter writers and they're all from different various parts of your pharmacy career or journey, and you're wondering which ones to submit with which programs. And the rule of thumb that I followed was that I had a core set of 3, and that was from 3 different API rotations I was on, and I would use those as my default to submit to every institution. And I had each of those letter writers, like I mentioned way back when, write an individual letter for that institution because that was something they were willing to do for me. And in the event that a program required a specific letter from someone, I would submit that specific letter from another letter writer in addition to the 2 of the 3 core letters that I felt was most relevant to the experience and to the program. So for me, I included my 2 clinical API letter writers as my base for most of them. And then in the event that a program asks for a specific letter, I would include that from an additional letter writer. Otherwise, my 3rd API rotation was my 3rd letter of recommendation. So for my year in particular, we only had 3 rotations before applications were due, so that worked out really well. But the other 2 that I needed for other programs was one from a supervisor or manager, which I got for my internship that I was in during pharmacy school, and then one program asked for a faculty member to speak to my academic ability. So I reached out to a faculty member that I'd worked closely with. The next thing is to make sure that you have all of your final drafts in place and that you triple, quadruple, to whatever nth degree, reread everything. At a certain point, it is going overboard because you know you've read it enough times, but really for every single one, make sure you read through it at least one time without making any edits to it before you submit it. I can't stress this enough because for me personally, I'm one of those people who rereads it way too many times, that's for sure. But it gave me peace of mind because it's so easy to miss some grammatical error or leaving off the S at the end of the word or using something in the wrong way. It really could be anything. You're writing so many of these things, and so it's easy for them to fall through the crack. And also, if you have somebody that can reread them for you, I think that's also really helpful because fresh set of eyes, they didn't write this. This is not their 80th time looking at it. Their eyes probably aren't burning from looking at a computer screen. And it can be really helpful as well, especially if you haven't had somebody kind of look over a general template of the way you've been doing things in case there's something that doesn't make sense to them, and you can help tease that part out for them and make that a little bit clearer in your communication in a written form. The next part is to make sure you gather all of your documents. And so for me, the way that I did this and I felt was best was I created a separate folder for every single program on my computer. And then I kept all of the materials for that under each program folder. That way I was always making sure I was pulling from the right place. I didn't have everything jumbled. Staying organized is super key because the last thing you want to do is to submit a really well-written letter intended for one program to another and vice versa, switch your wires up and whatnot, and it being exactly what you meant for it to be, but to go to the wrong place. And so that's why I also think naming your files is key and crucial. For me, I just put my full name, so Merverk, underscore what the actual document was, so whether it was my letter of intent, my CV, underscore, and then I put the date that I was submitting on, slash, I think either the date that it was due. So totally up to you, but I like to keep a standard practice, standard format, and then I would just keep them under the separate files listed by program name. You can also add in the program name there if you like. I think I did that when I started to get down to the final right before I was going to upload to Forecast because I got really paranoid that I was going to submit the wrong forms to the wrong place. So totally up to you what works best for you, as long as it's everything's spelled right and it's written in a way that looks appealing and as far as being organized and not just having it like one run on Word or anything like that is kind of what I meant, and having it spaced out appropriately. I think you'll be in a good spot. The next thing that I suggest is submitting your application 1 to 2 days before the deadline. So there's always the risk of a server getting overloaded or whatnot, or problems arising on the day of, and you don't want to miss out on an opportunity to meet with the program or have a program see your application just because of an error like that. So for me, I tried to submit 1 to 2 days beforehand. So in my planner, I not only had the days that the applications were actually due, but then I also had the days that I wanted to then submit them on. So I did this for almost every single program. There was one program where the supplemental was just a little too long, and not a little too long. I was just having to work through it, and so that one I ended up submitting the day of, which again, would not recommend unless you've already have like a couple drafts of it and whatnot. I just really needed to get down to editing it and submitting it, and it was the only thing I was doing during my break period. So I did have one that I submitted on the day of, but otherwise I tried to do it 1 to 2 days beforehand, just so there was no risk of me forgetting or missing it, because then if I did, I could just do it the next day and that would be the day that it's due. So again, just staying organized, double checking deadlines, make sure one time before your earliest one is due, you run through and make sure you know every single deadline you have. So then that way you can be sure that you're submitting it on time. I have, my next tip is to submit your applications one at a time. So on the last page of Forecast, you'll notice that you can only submit applications that are complete and for the program that you would like to submit it for. So in the event that you're able to add all of your documents for a certain program, you can go ahead and submit it, but that means you'll have to take out all of the other programs that you don't have materials for. And I actually highly recommend just doing that regardless if you have everything uploaded to Forecast, because it allows you to double check yourself. So as you can probably tell, I double check everything that I do. Growing up, like even on tests, I used to double check my answers before I submitted them. And I think it's a really good practice for administrative stuff, especially because, again, super easy to get your wires crossed or to click the wrong option from your drop-down menu. Especially for me, I had a lot of different documents uploaded because I had my letter writers write an individual letter for each program. So that's a lot of letters, a lot of names, a lot of institutions. So I like to just keep one program on my final page, the one that I'm working on, the one that I'm submitting, and then that way I can just focus on that. Try not to do too many at a time, just because, again, when you submit it, I just like to pay for one at a time as well, so I can ensure that it processes. This is just also what worked best for me. If you feel comfortable going in and adding all your programs and adding all the documents for it, go ahead. I just like being really sure that I had everything lined up and squared away. So just some food for thought if you're kind of getting overwhelmed or being like, do I have to submit them all at once? You can literally submit them one at a time. And I think that was best, or what worked best for me. So just thought I'd share that little pearl. And my last tip for December, this is basically just a tip video because I feel like the last couple of months, we've all had the opportunity to really figure out what we need to get done and just be able to put away so that we can move on with our lives into the next part, which is interviews. But before we jump the gun and before we get there, I recommend submitting your applications as soon as you can. I really don't think there's a reason to wait. I think if you're at a place where you feel comfortable with it and you want to submit it, you should so go ahead. There's no right way or wrong way of doing this. Well, there's a wrong way. You submit it after the deadline. That would be very wrong. But there's no rule or anything like that. I shared with you all what I did and what I thought worked best for me. But if you can submit them earlier, I highly recommend, because it's probably during your winter break if you get one, or if anything like that, you should take time for yourself. And regardless, these last couple of months were probably a lot of hard work and stress, and not probably, it definitely was, and you deserve some time off. And there's no point in stressing about these, worrying about them, letting them sit there because you're thinking you might make a big change later down the line. Just submit it. I guarantee that whatever you have is great. If you've gotten input from others, if you've really done your due diligence and reread your work, make sure everything is lined up and ready to go, it'll definitely save you a lot of stress and I think just overthinking in the future. And you should enjoy your time, because come January, by like the second or third week, you'll start hearing about interviews, and we'll be talking all things interview prep, and you'll have all of that to worry about then, but you shouldn't have to worry about that now. So if you can get all of these applications done as soon as possible and enjoy time with your friends, family, with yourself, watch some Netflix, do whatever makes you happy, and just kind of take your mind off this whole process, I think you will be better for it in the long run. So trust yourself. If you made it this far and you've put in the work to get to this point, I guarantee you're in a much better place than you really think you are. And with that, we will wrap up this month's episode. I hope that this was helpful for you all. Again, just some reminders as we move into this home stretch of submitting. And I'm so excited for all of you. And I'm so glad that we're at this point. I think it's a really exciting point because it's all of your hard work coming to fruition and you're putting yourself out there. And I think while that can be really scary, it's also really exciting. And you're one step closer to making your dreams happen and to really solidifying your future. So I hope this video helped. I hope at least you were able to take something away from it. And again, if you ever have any questions, you can always leave them below or reach out to me on Instagram at mayor.ferk or at Life on the Farm podcast. I will be trying to put up some podcast episodes about my past couple months and the experiences I've had, so definitely check that out. But until I see you all the next time, I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. And we'll be back soon with what we're looking forward to in January. Thanks, y'all. Bye.